Ruby, are you seriously going through with this? My father roared, his face turning crimson as he slammed his fists on the table. After everything I've done for you, Dad, I responded calmly. Though my heart raced, I've covered your mortgage for the past 4 years. I've done everything I can to support you, but I can't give you $10,000 to pay off a gambling debt. I just can't. His expression twisted into fury. You ungrateful little. He spat, grabbing a glass from the table and throwing it across the room. It shattered against the wall, pieces scattering across the floor. I flinched but didn't move. My stepmother, Patricia, appeared in the doorway, her face set in a disapproving frown. Ruby, why can't you just help them out? She said as if she were simply asking me to pass the salt. My name is Ruby, and I've always been the responsible one in my family for as long as I can recall. I'm 31, single, and have dedicated most of my adult life to establishing a stable career in marketing. In contrast, my father, Gerald, is the kind of person who can charm his way out of anything but has no concept of managing his life. When my mother passed away a decade ago, he married Patricia within a year. She wasn't the wicked stepmother stereotype, but she never stood up to him either. Together, they created a toxic environment where Gerald's poor decisions were continually excused or ignored. And for years, I played along, paying the bills and maintaining peace, but this was the limit. I'm not doing this, I said, standing and brushing the glass shards from my jeans. I've sacrificed enough for you. I won't continue enabling your gambling. If you want to fix this, you'll have to do it yourself. Gerald's face flushed, his anger boiling over. You're selfish, just like your mother, always thinking of yourself. The mention of my mom felt like a slap, but I didn't let it show. I'm done, I said, turning to Patricia. And you're just as bad for letting this continue. Her lips tightened, but she didn't respond. That night, I packed a bag, my hands shaking as I stuffed clothes and essentials into it. I wasn't sure where I was headed, but I knew I couldn't stay. As I zipped the bag shut, I glanced at the folder of documents I'd been quietly collecting, evidence of Gerald's gambling addiction, bank statements, and the eviction notice I'd been holding on to as a last resort. Tomorrow, they'd see just how serious I was. The next morning, I awoke to sunlight streaming through the blinds of Elena's guest room. She had taken me in without hesitation, her usual mix of practicality and empathy on full display. So, what's the plan? She asked as we sipped coffee at her kitchen table. Because if you think they're going to take this lying down, you're kidding yourself. Elena had been my best friend since college and knew my dad's antics better than most. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I'm going to serve them the eviction papers and let the legal system handle it. I can't argue with him anymore, Elena. He just turns it into a guilt trip or an explosion. Good, she said firmly. He's been taking advantage of you for years. It's time he faces some consequences. She wasn't wrong. For the past 4 years, I had quietly paid my dad's mortgage, putting my own financial goals on hold because he was in a tough spot. At first, I thought I was doing the right thing, helping family and being the dutiful daughter, but the longer it went on, the clearer it became that I was just enabling him. Every time I tried to talk about his gambling, he'd dismiss it with a laugh or shift the blame to Patricia for nagging him too much. And Patricia, she'd just shrug and say, "That's how he is." Last night had been the final straw. The glass shattering against the wall, his shout about how I was just like my mother, it was like a switch had flipped. I wasn't going to let him drag me down any further. After breakfast, I opened the folder I'd brought with me and laid out the evidence. Screenshots of text messages where he'd begged me for money, bank statements showing the payments I'd made on his mortgage, and printouts of gambling hotline referrals I'd given him that he'd ignored. Wow, Elena said, flipping through the pages. You've been holding on to this for a while. I didn't want it to come to this, I admitted, but I knew he'd never stop if I didn't have a plan. This way, when he tries to play the victim, I have proof of everything. She nodded approvingly. Smart. So, when are you dropping the hammer? Tonight, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I'll leave the papers and evidence on the kitchen counter when I go to grab the rest of my things. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late to gill me back. As I packed my things to head over, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to my dad's chaos. I was taking control when I drove into the driveway. The tension in my stomach was so intense it was hard to breathe. The house appeared unchanged, peeling paint, a porch in disrepair, and a garden overtaken by weeds. It dawned on me how closely this house resembled my dad's life, neglected and chaotic, yet barely holding together. As I entered, I braced for what I might discover. The living room was vacant, but the muted sound of the TV echoed from the back den, where my dad and Patricia were likely sitting, watching something trivial and pretending all was well. I hurried to my old room to collect the remaining items. The duffel bag I had left was still stowed under the bed, so I filled it with the leftover odds and ends, photo albums, a few books, and my mom's necklace. On my way out, I halted in the kitchen. The counter, usually littered with junk mail and coffee mugs, now held a neatly arranged stack of documents, the eviction notice, financial records, and a handwritten note. I picked up the note and read it one last time. Dad, I've spent years supporting you, but it's only fueled your gambling habits. I can't continue this. I've paid off the mortgage, and now you must take responsibility for your actions. Read the papers. They explain everything. I hope you can change, but I won't let you pull me down anymore.
Love.
Ruby. My hands trembled as I placed the note back on the stack. It wasn't angry or spiteful, just honest, and for once, I wasn't afraid to voice it. As I turned to leave, I heard the TV switch off, and my dad's voice boomed from the den. Ruby, is that you? I froze, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to flee, but I inhaled deeply and stepped into the doorway. Yeah, Dad. I'm just here to grab the rest of my things. He looked at me with a mix of suspicion and annoyance. You're not really leaving, are you? Come on, Ruby, you're overreacting. Patricia chimed in from the couch, her tone exasperated. You can't walk away from family. I'm not walking away, I said, my voice steady but firm. I'm setting boundaries. You'll understand when you read the papers. Without waiting for their response, I walked out, feeling lighter with each step. That evening, sitting in Elena's living room with the eviction papers filed and the note left behind, my heart was still racing from the confrontation, or lack thereof. Leaving without looking back was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I knew it was right. Elena handed me a cup of tea, sitting down next to me. How are you feeling? I gazed into the steaming cup, searching for an answer. Relieved, I finally said, but guilty too. He's my dad, you know. I keep wondering if I went too far. She gave me a look. Ruby, you've been paying his mortgage for years, and he threw a glass at you when you refused more money. That's not normal. You didn't go too far. You finally stood up for yourself. I nodded, knowing she was right, though the guilt lingered. Part of me hoped that by leaving the papers and evidence, my dad would be compelled to face the consequences of his gambling. Yet deep down, I doubted he would change. The next morning, my phone buzzed incessantly with texts and calls from my dad. I didn't answer, letting the messages stack up, each angrier than the last. What the hell is this, Ruby? Eviction papers? Are you serious? I can't believe you'd do this to your own father. You think you're better than me? You're just like your mother. That stung. But I refused to break. By afternoon, Patricia called, her tone laced with fake concern. Ruby, this has gone far enough. Your father is devastated. Do you really want to put him through this? I took a deep breath. Patricia, I didn't do this to him. He did it to himself. If you want to help, encourage him to get help for his gambling. I'm done cleaning up his mess.
She sighed.
You're unreasonable. Family is supposed to stick together. No, I said firmly. Family is supposed to respect and support each other. This isn't that. I hung up before she could respond, my hands trembling. The calls and messages reinforced what I knew. I couldn't return. For the first time in years, I was prioritizing myself. It was terrifying, but it also felt like liberation. By the following day, the messages stopped, replaced by a silence that felt louder than his shouting. But Patricia, she was insistent, leaving voicemails loaded with guilt-laden speeches saying things such as "We don't know how we'll cope without you, and you're abandoning those who care for you." Love didn't throw glasses or demand thousands without hesitation. It didn't manipulate you into giving up everything while offering nothing back. That night, as we sat in her living room, I told Elena, "I think I need to block them. I can't listen to this anymore." She nodded. "You've done more for them than anyone else would. Blocking them is for your sanity, not because you're a bad person." I hesitated, my thumb hovering over my phone's screen. It felt so final, severing the last means of communication. But recalling all I had tolerated, the yelling, manipulation, endless justifications, I pressed the button. That evening, I went over the paperwork with Elena again, confirming everything was in order. The eviction notice was solid, and the proof of my father's gambling painted a clear picture of why it was necessary. "You've got everything covered," Elena noted while reviewing the documents. "They don't stand a chance if they challenge this." "Thanks," I said, managing a small smile. "I just wished it hadn't come to this." "You gave them every opportunity to change," she reminded me. "This isn't on you, Ruby, it's on them." Her words offered some solace, yet the gravity of the situation still weighed me down. Even knowing it was the right decision, I couldn't help but feel the sadness of it all. It was more than money. It was years of hurt and disappointment reaching a climax. The next day, I received an unforeseen call from the lawyer managing the eviction. "Ruby, your father reached out to challenge the eviction, claiming he owns the house." I clenched my jaw. "Did he provide any evidence?" "No," said the lawyer. "He has no legal ground to stand on. The mortgage was settled in your name. I wanted to warn you it might get messy before it's resolved." "Thank you for the heads up," I said as I hung up, a new determination sparking within me. If my father wanted a fight, he would get one, but this time, I wasn't backing down. Over the following week, I concentrated on gathering all evidence possible to prepare for my father's challenge. Bank statements, text messages, proof of mortgage payments. Everything was there. A clear trail of all I'd done for him. Elena helped sort through it all. "Ruby," she said, holding up a damning set of texts where my dad had promised to stop gambling if I paid his bills. "This alone shows his manipulative nature. You have nothing to worry about." "I know," I replied, exhaling slowly. "But it's still exhausting, fighting my own father just to protect myself." "You're not fighting him," she insisted. "You're defending yourself. There's a difference." Later that evening, I received an email from the lawyer containing my dad's challenge to the eviction, an incoherent letter full of falsehoods. He claimed the mortgage was a favor, with unfounded promises of repayment. It was frustrating but also liberating. For the first time, I realized how powerless his words were when I didn't let them affect me. I replied to the lawyer with additional documents refuting every claim. When I hit send, I felt lighter, taking control of a situation that had long controlled me. The next morning, the lawyer called with an update. "Ruby, the challenge is baseless. He has no legal grounds to contest. We're proceeding as planned." "Thank you," I said, feeling relieved. "What's the next step?" "The eviction will be enforced within 30 days, she explained. "If he refuses to leave, law enforcement will get involved, but with no evidence, it likely won't come to that." I hung up and leaned back, letting the relief wash over me. For years, I was the one holding us together, but for the first time, I was setting the terms. That evening, I called Elena to share the news. "It's finally happening," I said, my voice a mix of excitement, and the day had finally arrived when I pulled into the driveway with the final eviction paperwork in one hand, filled with determination in the other. Standing there, the house didn't seem like a battlefield anymore, but rather the end of a chapter. As I knocked, Patricia opened the door, her face falling upon seeing the documents I held. "Oh, Ruby," she murmured, shaking her head. "Is this truly necessary?" "Yes," I affirmed, stepping inside. My father lounged in the living room, TV remote and drink in hand, his look transitioning between irritation and self-satisfaction. "What now?" he grumbled. I dropped the papers on the coffee table, declaring, "This," with unshaken voice, "you have 30 days to leave." He examined the papers, scowling. "You think this means anything?" he sneered, tossing them aside. "I'm your father. You can't just throw me out of my own house." "This isn't your house, Dad," I replied. "It hasn't been for years. I've been covering the mortgage and I have proof." The lawyer confirmed the eviction's legitimacy. Patricia hovered close by, wringing her hands. "Ruby, please," she pleaded softly. "We're family. Can't we resolve this?" "Family?" I echoed, my voice rising against the calm I attempted to maintain. Where was that family bond when he hurled a glass at me? Or when he demanded $10,000 to settle his gambling debts? I've done everything for you both, only to receive manipulation and disrespect. It's over now. My father rose, face red with anger. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" he spat. "Just like your mother, always making me the villain." I held his gaze, my voice unwavering despite my trembling hands. "This isn't about superiority. It's about boundaries. You've exploited me for years, and I'm finished with it. If you intend to stay, you'll battle in court, not with me." He didn't reply, just sat back with a laugh. "You'll regret this," he mumbled. "No," I said, turning to leave. "I won't." Leaving the house for the last time, an unexpected peace took hold of me. Though uncertain about the future, it felt promising. The days that followed were quieter than anticipated. I'd braced for another wave of frantic calls or intimidation attempts from my dad or Patricia, urging me to retract the eviction, but only silence ensued. A part of me speculated if they were in denial, assuming I might change my mind or that the legal process would unravel. However, I was certain. I'd meticulously ensured that the law was on my side. One morning, an email arrived from the lawyer handling the eviction, stating, "Your father has not submitted any formal objections. If they fail to vacate by the deadline, law enforcement will enforce the eviction." The news brought relief mixed with sorrow. Relief because I was free from the toxic cycle, and sorrow because I wished for a different outcome deep down. Alina invited me to lunch in celebration, saying, "Here's to Ruby setting boundaries and reclaiming her life," raising her glass. I laughed, clinking mine to hers. "It's about time, isn't it?" "You're handling this better than I would," Alina commented. "I'd probably be putting up for sale signs on their lawn to make a point." "Tempting," I admitted with a smile. "But I think the papers speak for themselves." As we ate, Alina became serious, asking, "How are you really?" I paused, contemplating, and responded, "I feel lighter, like I'm shedding a long-carried weight. But it's also bittersweet. They're my family. I wished they'd made different choices." "That's on them," Alina asserted firmly. "You've done more than enough. It's okay to let go." With the eviction deadline nearing, I drove by the house one last time, noting the front porch cluttered with boxes, a definite sign of their preparation to leave. Without stopping, I continued driving. That evening, my lawyer confirmed they've vacated the property. The house is now legally yours to manage. Staring at the message, a wave of emotions overwhelmed me. For years, that house symbolized sacrifice, guilt, and, in the quiet of my apartment, conflict felt like a distant memory. For the first time in years, I was genuinely free. Waking up the morning after the eviction deadline felt surreal. I realized I no longer had to anticipate a call from my dad or a guilt-laden message from Patricia. The house, the arguments, and the unending demands were all behind me. Sitting with a cup of coffee on the balcony of Elena's apartment, I gazed at the city skyline. "You seem quiet this morning," Elena observed as she joined me with her own cup. "I think it's finally dawning on me," I confessed. "It's over. They're out. I can move forward." Elena's smile was playful as she teased. "And here I thought you'd be throwing a party." I chuckled, shaking my head.
No, not yet.
"I think I just need time to sit with this. It's like I've been on autopilot for so long. I don't know how to handle the peace." Over the next week, I began to reconnect with parts of my life I'd sidelined. I enrolled in a photography class, something I'd always wanted to do, but never found the time or energy for. My weekends became about exploring new hiking trails, breathing in fresh air, and feeling genuinely present for the first time in years. Elena noticed the transformation almost immediately. "You look lighter," she remarked one evening as we cooked dinner together. "I feel lighter," I acknowledged, realizing it was true. For the first time, I wasn't shouldering their problems. "Good," she said, raising her spatula in a mock toast to that. Although the house was still legally mine, I no longer saw it as a home. It was filled with too many memories, too much excess baggage. Instead, I chose to rent it out. The process was surprisingly therapeutic, renovating it, making decisions about the space, imagining someone else finding happiness there. Handing over the keys to the new tenants brought a blend of emotions, a little sadness for what might have been, but a lot of relief and hope for what lay ahead. This wasn't just about letting go of a house or a toxic relationship. It was about reclaiming my time, my energy, and my life. Driving away from the house for the last time, I felt the burden of the past finally lift. A few weeks later, sitting in a cozy cafe flipping through photos from my new class, I was surprised by how much joy I found in something so simple. For too long, my time and energy had been consumed by my father's demands and the chaos it brought. Now, I was rediscovering parts of myself I had almost forgotten. Elena slid into the seat across from me, grinning. "Look at you, Ruby," actually smiling. I laughed, setting the photos aside. "It feels strange, doesn't it? Being happy." "It suits you," she said, sipping her coffee. "So, what's next? World domination? Opening your own studio?" I rolled my eyes playfully. "Nothing that dramatic. Honestly, I just want to keep building a life that's mine. No guilt, no pressure, just freedom." Later that evening, I reflected on everything that had transpired over the past months. The eviction, the confrontation, the emotional aftermath. It had all seemed so overwhelming at the time, like I was sinking in quicksand, but now I realized how much stronger I'd become. For years, I'd thought that sacrificing for my family was the only way to show love, but I'd come to understand that love should uplift, not drain. I wondered if my dad and Patricia had learned anything from this. Part of me hoped they had, but I knew better than to hold my breath. Change isn't something you can force. It has to come from within. Sitting by the window, with the city lights twinkling in the distance, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The house was rented, my boundaries were set, and my future felt full of possibilities. I had been defined by my contributions to others, the sacrifices I made, and the burdens I bore. But now I was finally learning to define myself by what I chose to do for me. Picking up my camera, I snapped a quick photo of the city skyline. The image captured more than just the view. It captured a moment of clarity and a reminder of how far I'd come. This was my life now, and for the first time it felt truly mine.